Hey guys, I'm Mark,
I'm Alon.
and welcome to another episode of The Next Man Up. Well, welcome listeners to the Next Man Up podcast, where we are about raising up the next generation of men because we believe that when boys become godly, healthy men, everyone benefits. This is your host, Mark Stanifer, and I am joined once again by my co-host, the incredible Mr. Alon Auguste. How are you, man?
Doing good, man. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good.
All right.
Are you staying warm today? I know this isn't your favorite type of weather.
Not my MO, man. Someone turned the heat back on. It's craziness.
I think winter finally called and said, hey, it's January, let me in.
Right. It's like, I guess, this having 50, 60 degree weather, it's probably like, okay, you had enough.
Yeah.
Here's a blast of cold. Thank you, and you're welcome.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we both agreed that it's the up and down that's hard.
Yeah.
I know the cold can be hard for people who aren't cold weather fans, but the up and like teasing with some spring-like or fall-like weather, and then back to sub-zero temperatures, it's hard.
Yes, it's torture.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan.
Well, I appreciate you being here today and gutting it out and.
It's for the cause, Mark.
That's
it's for
right.
The cause.
It is a good cause. Hey, so before we get to today's topic, listeners, I want to ask for your help. This year, we want to broaden the reach of this conversation. So if there's someone you know who could benefit from these conversations, would you share this podcast with them? Send them a link or tell them what you like about the show and invite them to give it a try. It's just that easy. If you could help us in this way, we would appreciate it.
Yeah, be helpful.
That's right. Okay, so millennials.
Yes.
That population that was, based on what we're told, the population of people born between the early 80s, the early to mid 80s into the mid 90s or early thousands, 2000s.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah. This is the millennial generation. And I don't know about you, but I see a lot of things written and listen or hear a lot of things discussed about the millennial generation.
Yeah.
And, maybe I'm just of the age where I'm aware of generational differences and I'm kind of paying attention to my generation, Gen X, versus the generation coming behind. Or maybe there's just a lot more being said and read and written and talked about with regard to this generation. But I read an article recently that tried to kind of capture some of the big themes within millennial parents. And I thought maybe we could just kick some of the ideas around from that article today.
Okay. This should be interesting.
It's always interesting.
Before we go on, I do have to say, you mentioned that about the information and such. Our former generation or our parents, they didn't have access to the information that we do.
So that's fair.
And
absolutely.
When I think of like the older generation talking about like the next generation or younger generation, I always see like these old folks in my head sitting on a porch, rocking chair. And seeing these young whippersnappers running by.
In my day.
That's probably not, I can probably guarantee that's not what we're trying to do here today. But
well, we might need to resist the temptation because it's in me to go there.
Yeah.
I think because I'm old enough to be like, I could do that.
Yeah. That's not the hope. We don't want to exclude anyone in this conversation. But this article is interesting, full of like interesting information that I think it would be good to pay attention to.
Yeah. Because I think there are some themes that come out of this from different sources that give an indication of the tendencies for millennial parents today. And really the question that we want to ask is that what you want? As a parent, is that what you want? Is that what you want for your kids? Is that the best thing for your kids? I mean, we could go through a number of examples over the last 40 or 50 years where pop culture said, this is the best thing.
Yeah.
and then come to find out as kids age, as parents age, as science catches up, right? We find that maybe that wasn't the best approach.
Yep.
And so there's some things in here that that I thought we could just kind of tease out, and then when we get to the end, we'll just ask a few questions.
Yeah.
As part of the wrap up. So you got this generation that was born in the mid 80s for like 15-year period into the mid late 90s or early 2000s. There's, depending on who you look for to a definition, you can find 10 years up to probably close to 20 years. These kids were coming of age in the early 2000s in the third millennium, which is something I learned. Like that's where the name Millennial came from. They're also known as Gen Y, this generation.
Okay.
But they are coming of age at the beginning of the third millennium. And what do you know that has happened significantly in the 2000 to 2010 timeframe? The economy, stupid, as one of the politicians used to say, or running around election time. It's the economy. What has happened in the economy in the first decade of 2000? Right?
Yeah.
We had the big tech crash early on in the 2000s, and then the whole real estate crash, the Great Recession. So these kids are coming of age, watching parents lose houses. They're graduating from college and they're having a hard time finding a job. They have borrowed a lot of money to get through college because the price of college has gone up. Housing prices have gone up, and so it's hard to afford housing today, right? Like there's just a lot of economic variables that they are waking up into as they become adults. And I think that has a lot to do with how this generation is approaching life in general, not specifically or not yet specifically parenting, but just how they're approaching life in general.
Mm-hmm. The first thing I thought of was 9/11.
Well, there's another big event too.
Yeah. So it just sounds like a lot of things breaking down.
Yeah.
That are typically like seen as, things that should be stable, that are around you.
So like institutions or foundations that you thought were there just begin to break down or crumble.
Yeah, it's like, it hasn't been an attack on our country's soil since Pearl Harbor before 9/11. So now it's like, oh shoot. Like, I mean, this is not like we're living in a country that sees attacks all the time.
Right.
This is the United States. We don't see that all the time. Well,
right.
At least we don't hear about it.
We're not conditioned
to
it.
You know what I mean? So it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, so from 9/11 to, it was supposed to be like this huge tech-like advance. And before the clock even like changes over, we're all scared of Y2K stuff, which was interesting because it wasn't as bad as everyone was saying. But it's interesting from that time, like you see things happening in technology where it's like, oh, well, I guess we weren't as advanced as we thought, or man, we're way more advanced and we're not ready.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's even the laws on the internet are like, we don't have them yet. We're still trying to work out those bugs of what is actually illegal and legal online.
Right. Right.
And then this. You're right. The stock market's crashed, and it's like, oh wait, my family doesn't have a house now. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I mean, as you go down on a list of the list that you just listed out, I'm thinking in my head, yeah, pretty unnerving for a child to grow up in all that.
Yeah.
And to all of a sudden be an adult with kids of your own.
Right.
I would think that there would be a lot of anxiety and a lot of pressure to make sure that you provide for your kid and that you raise your kid well.
Yeah.
And the question is, how do you do that? So yeah.
Yeah, the word that came to mind as you were talking was just fear. All of these things have happened, and it could create a sense of living out of the fear of that happening again, or the more positive is trying to do everything you can so that you're protected if and when that happens again, either for you or for your kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
In 2016, I found this interesting. 80% of the kids born, 80% of the babies born in 2016 were to millennial parents.
That's it's a lot of kids.
It's a lot of kids. Well, and so it's that shift that's happening, right? I've seen statistics around how the percentage of the workforce that is millennial today versus where it's going to be in 10 years, right? Like obviously the percentage is going to increase, but 8 out of 10 parents having a child a couple of years ago were in this millennial generation. So this is the generation that's going to be influencing parenting themes and ideas and the parenting culture for the foreseeable future.
I don't even know how to respond to that. Because I'm still a parent myself. So
yeah.
I'm like, and so like there is this sense of like this passing of the torch.
Yeah.
So to speak, and whatnot. I'm curious. This article seems to have a bunch of different themes because like that they bring up to kind of connect with that. Like, what are the themes? What are the themes that this article is saying millennial parents will probably run with?
Yeah.
For their foreseeable future.
So the article writer draws a bunch from author Jim Peterson in his book, The Rise of the Millennial Parents. So Peterson got interested in this topic because he kept noticing that the questions that he was getting asked or the information that was being shared with him was different than previous generations. So at first it was like, it's just a new generation, right? We go through this with every generation, the old looking at the new, right? But he started to see some things that were different. And the interesting quote from the article for me was he began to see parents who were fastidiously obsessed with their own kids' success and willing to clear any and all hurdles for them. Now, I got to be honest, the first thing that came to mind...
What is fastidious?
No. No, actually, the first thing that came to my mind was the whole college cheating scandal.
Oh, yeah.
With the celebrities and...
that was huge.
Massimo and Lachlan and like now I those aren't millennial parents, but that was the first thing that came to mind with that last statement, that they're willing to clear any and all hurdles for them. I think what he's getting at is it's more than just advocating for my child.
Yeah.
It's actively working to clear away any resistance to them getting to where they want to go. And that was a shift as he was assessing previous generations. That was a shift that he was noticing with this one.
So what he's saying is generations before may not have done that as much.
Yeah, or as aggressively, or as fastidiously
attentive, or like pretty much paying very close, concerned attention.
Yeah,
and such.
Yeah,
I know. I just looked that up.
He says they aren't afraid. This generation isn't afraid to ask for certain accommodations for their children. And you're in the school system. You know this to be true, right?
Yeah.
It's almost demanded, he says. They're more aware of policies and procedures than some staff and faculty in school. They make noise. So this is what he's noticing about this generation of parent, that they're just active and I'm going to use the word assertive, maybe is a better way. They're just very assertive in...
Which is good. As a parent, like on one end, you're like, you want to be able to stand up and help your kid. It's not like they can uh, they can do it all themselves. I mean, and when I think about a court of law, I think like that's why you get a lawyer, because he or she knows way more about the law than you do.
Yeah.
And
An advocate.
can advocate for you well. You know? And so as parents, we want to advocate well for our kids. But there is this sense, man, that there is a sense that you cross a line at some point.
Yeah. And
it becomes more than just, I'm trying to help my son or daughter. I'm trying to teach them, like, you know, monkey see, monkey do, like watch me stand up and then you stand up kind of a deal. And so showing them how to do like life and advocate for themselves. I have even personally come across like some parents who I go, is this really about your kid or is this really about you?
That's interesting.
You know what I mean? Like you seem to be way more like tripping out than your kid is about this thing.
Yeah.
And are you sure you understand what you are asking for the school to do? Like this is way beyond normal capabilities and resources that we have here. Like I don't think you get it.
Yeah.
You know, unless you want to come in and do what you're asking. You know, like that's where it's probably going to end up coming to.
Yeah.
You know, and for those moments, it's really hard to help. And sometimes it's really hard to help people see that. To see that, like, what you're asking is just way too much right now.
Yeah.
And maybe you need to rethink if it's really about your kid or if it's really about you.
There's a story in this article, and I think it's from Peterson's book, where he talks about a conversation between a parent and a principal, and the parent just getting really, really fired up. And all of a sudden, it's this first-person story of the parent back as a student in her high school, and the principal's like, ma'am, I am not your principal. And she had gone back in time.
Yeah.
And all of that was coming out as Mama Bear, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
But so much of it had to do with her own past and her own journey. And yet it was playing out like on behalf of her child.
And to an extent, it's like, I get it, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
you know, but especially when it comes to like right and wrong with a kid.
Yep.
Like, no, you understand? These are the school rules.
Right.
This is our norms. This is how we do things.
They're not just suggestions.
Yeah, they're not suggestions. This is how we do things. This is actually for the safety of your kid. And a parent comes in and trips out on us because we're telling their son or daughter that they can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Like, you let them do that. Like, you know, basically. And it's like, no. like, I'm sorry, but we can't do that.
You know, we talk a lot about being engaged, right?
Yeah.
Like that is a critical word here in the message that we're sending to men and to fathers. But there's a fine line between being engaged and being overbearing and overspending, as the article states.
Yeah, yeah.
So, another piece of information that came out of this Pew Research Center study found that a majority of millennial parents say they are too overprotective, compared to 60% of Gen X and a little over half of boomers. Millennials are more likely to say they're too overprotective or they're more overprotective. They are also more likely to say they give too much praise, and 40% of millennials admitting that they compliment their kids too much. Which I found interesting, because on the one hand, you can, I believe, you can create a scenario that is like a fantasy land scenario for your child, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Where you can think it and it will just be, and you're so super special that even rules don't apply to you.
Right.
On the other hand, I think what we would advocate also is for affirmation and blessing and praise and speaking life into your child, building them up. And here we've got millennials saying that they admit that they probably compliment their kids too much, or they're giving their kids too much praise.
Yeah, yeah. Say, I mean, we were talking before the show, and like, I was like, oh, that's like every generation.
Yeah.
There's parents who, we can be unbalanced. Like, we can praise way too much and never, never are, the disciplinarian for our kid. Or we can go the opposite other way. We can straight up just trash our kid, and make him or her feel like they're crap. Like they never do anything right and whatever. And every once in a while, I'll be like, oh yeah, by the way, you're good in that. I think there's a balancing act that comes about, and for every generation of parents, and it's just important that we find that we find that balance where it's like, look, you're encouraging, you're constructing, you're building up, and it's coming both from praise and like, hey, I see you're a little off here. Let's help you get correct.
I like how you brought both of those into the context of building them up.
Yeah, because you either destroy or construct. You either destruct or construct, and like as parents, we want to aim for the latter. We want to construct more, and so that comes from both. That comes from both of helping to correct as well as giving a pat on the back, going, you're doing amazing in this area. And it's really hard to find a balance. I can understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the correction, the discipline, the words that aren't just everything is great, rainbows and butterflies and all that. It's harder.
Yeah.
It's much easier to just be like, no, everything's great, honey. You're doing great. It's perfect. Go get them. It's a little harder to have that big boy conversation.
Yeah.
That isn't just everything is great.
Yeah. And especially if your parents were really hard on you, which creates a lot of these feelings and emotions inside. And of course,
I don't want to be like that.
I don't want to do that to my kid.
Right.
And it's like, and I get that. Like, I came from a very crazy background of parenting, and so there's a lot of stuff that I go, no, I'm not doing that with my kid. I mean, I remember I spanked one of our kids, and I went in my room and cried after. So I'm like, I remember spankings being very tough. Like they were abusive. So I was like, man, I never want to abuse my kid. Did I abuse my kid? Not my kid. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and so you have these moments where you're looking at your kids through the parenting lenses of your parents. Yep. And you're like, I don't want to do that. But the good news is that you're not your parents. You're not. You're you.
That's right.
And
you can choose.
You could choose, like, to in a very balancing way approach your parenting for your child in totally different ways than your parents. But some of us were not there yet. Yeah. It's hard to really even get there because we have all this cloudedness going on in our own hearts and minds about parenting.
So there was one statement in here that really caught my attention and appreciated being part of this article. It said that millennial dads are more involved with their children's upbringing than any other generation of men before them. And so there's probably lots of different reasons why, right? Yeah. And I don't really want to unpack all of those possible reasons. I just look at it as, hey, dads are engaging. They're engaging in a way that in previous generations either wasn't possible because of the working conditions, or it wasn't acceptable because of the manhood conditions, or whatever. Maybe they just didn't even know how or understand the importance of. We got a generation here that is willing to engage as a dad and take on the parenting functions like never before, and I think that's all positive.
Yeah, totally. There was I remember getting out of high school, and there was a huge push for fathers to show up. Like there was lots of trends and information. Lots of information on the trend of fatherlessness, and then it started going into just fathers maybe being there physically, but just not being present in mind and such. And so to hear that, millennial dads are more engaging than previous generations, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. It's like, that means there's a lot more kids. And in this case, for what we're talking about, there's a lot more boys who have fathers in their lives who are trying and engaging. That's great.
Yep. Agree. So we've spent a number of minutes talking through the different conclusions, the different themes from this article. And so those of you that have listened to us for a while, one of my favorite questions is, so what? So here's our questions to you listeners. What did you hear today that will cause you to reflect and to grow from the content? And of course, if you're interested in the article, we'll have it in the show notes that you can link to and refer to. But what did you hear today that causes you to reflect and to grow? Second question, what do you need to talk about with your spouse or with your partner in terms of your philosophy of parenting, or some of these ideas, or maybe some of the imbalance, the excess in one way or another? And maybe the bigger question here is, what are your goals for your kids, and how is your parenting helping or hurting them? And I'll just, one of the concerns I have when I read this, particularly back to that first statement, clearing the way, removing all obstacles. We did a whole episode on helping to build resiliency in kids. It's number 70 from last year. If you're interested and you haven't heard that, go back and listen to that, because there are some benefits in providing the space for kids to build those muscles. Air quotes, muscles, not just physical muscles, but the muscles in general. And so what are your goals for your parenting, and how is your current parenting philosophy and style helping or hurting your kids as you're taking them on their journey toward becoming adults and parents of their own? Mm-hmm. Well, dude, thanks for engaging with this topic today. As always, your insight is good, and appreciate your thoughts. And listeners, once again, I'll remind you, if you're liking what you're hearing and would be willing to share with somebody else who might benefit, we would certainly love for you to do that, and would appreciate it. And if you got a question, a thought, a comment, just hit us up at feedback@thenextmanup.com. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, with that, we'll wrap it here as we normally do. Until next time.
Adios.
Adios. Hey, listeners, thanks for journeying with us on this Next Man Up podcast. We would love to hear from you. Maybe you have a question or an idea, perhaps a topic for us to consider. If that's you and you want to reach out to us, you can get us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. That's feedback@thenextmanup.com. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you later.